Since I was a small kid, I wanted to be a baseball player in the worst way. My dad was a manager in the minor leagues, which many times I could go to work with him, put a uniform on at 10 years old, shag in the outfield, and watch these minor leaguers try to become big league players. And I thought the coolest job at that time was what they were doing, was playing in the minor leagues. And then I was lucky enough to have talent and get drafted in the minor leagues. So now I'm going through the minor leagues, which I'm pretty familiar with. And once I got to the big leagues, the minor leagues didn't at the time prepare you for all the other stuff that went with it. Meaning you get into a big stadium for the first time and you walk out on the field and you're looking up. It feels like you're on a stage and you're giving a performance, as opposed to before you were at a smaller field, less people in the stands, and you were still playing a game. All of a sudden now it feels pretty magical. So the question is, can you really teach awareness? Because sometimes when you can teach all kinds of things: how to throw a baseball, how to catch a baseball, how to hit a baseball, how to hold it, all that. But some of the other things, can you really teach someone to be aware in the moment, like where multiple things are happening? On the baseball field, I felt that I had that sort of awareness. I could sit back on a play. There was a play developing where a guy was going to get thrown out at third. I could sit in the cutoff spot and I could move back a little bit, and then I could start to take in some data. I could see the ball coming in at a certain time, the runners coming in at a certain speed. Looks like a race is developing between these two. I can see if the ball is fading or it has good pace on it. Is it accurate? It's going to bounce good in the to third baseman. Should I let it go or should I not? And then I can see the runner come in that hit the ball, and I could see them running past first base, and I could see, okay, he's out if I cut the ball off. And so there's a lot of people that can't take all that in at that same time. So I kept thinking, how do you teach awareness? How do you teach, and I think it's such a good thing to be aware in this space. I think it's a great skill that I don't know if it's physically can be taught. I think it can be taught over time. The way that I learned it is that if you're aware that other things are going on, and then you can kind of slow them down. In sport, you hear a lot of people, the announcers say, he has the ability to slow the game down. When you're in the zone, I can tell you, it seems like things happen in slow motion. If somebody's throwing the ball and you're hitting the ball really well, you might have 50,000 people in the stands going nuts. You might be a great big moment in the game, and we talked about pressure a little bit, and all of a sudden you're trying to deal with that pressure. And all of a sudden you get into this spot that all of a sudden everything goes quiet, and the pitcher gets ready to throw the ball, and the ball comes out of his hand, and it seems like it's tumbling towards you. And then you're looking at it, and you might think, okay, I think he's going to throw a breaking ball here. And then you go, no, that's a fastball. And then I think I'll swing. And then you, pow, and the ball comes off your bat and goes wherever really hard. And then as you start to run to first base, the crowd comes back, and the speed comes back in the game or whatever else. And you get on second base and go, how did I do that? It's not luck to hit a home run. It's not luck to hit, and it's not luck to be successful. There's some lucky aspects to it. If I hit a ball right here on my fist and breaks my bat, and it jams over the shortstop's head and lands in, you can call that a lucky hit. Or if I swing and smother the ball and it turns out to be a perfect bunt down the third baseline and you get an infield hit, you can say that was a lucky hit. But there's nothing lucky about standing in the box and trying to hit someone that's throwing 95 miles an hour and trying to mix the pitches in. You know what? Eddie was probably the best leader by example and not so much by words. Sometimes if he said something, then you had to stand up and listen to it. But for the most part, he taught me the importance of being there every single day, because I got credit for this streak that I played in all these games in a row over 17 years. He was an everyday player, and the definition of an everyday player at that time was every single day. And if you're a player like Eddie Murray, who hit fourth in your lineup, switch hitter, clutch guy, power guy, the lineup felt right when he's in the lineup. It didn't feel right if he wasn't in the lineup. So he understood his presence on the team. He understood his value. And even though he was a little banged up, a little hurt maybe, got hit with a pitch or slid into a base wrong, he always saw the importance of his presence being in the lineup, and he would make that known to me. He said, you need to play. They're all counting on you. We're all counting on you. And so following his example, really started that thing called the streak. A person that plays baseball and plays 140 games or 145 games has the same sort of aches and pains and goes through that someone that plays 162. So I would say you only feel 100% in the first day of spring training. And then every sort of day after that, because you do it on a daily basis, you come down to some level. Now, some players can play at 80% or 85% and play really well. Some people don't feel like they can. I was of the mentality that I could play even though I was hurt. And if you push yourself through some of those moments, you find out that you can. And when you do perform really well, when you feel like you're not 100%, that gives you confidence each and every time to come back and answer the call. Well, I have a controlling kind of personality, and so early on I wanted to kind of control things so I could deal with them, right? Anywhere from if the media was getting out of control in a sense, I had to bring some control to that. And so during the early part of that year, when I went into a series, we developed a routine where we talked to the media for the first day, and it would buy me an opening for this next 2 days where I could keep things sort of normal. But as the season went on, there was this finish line that started to develop. Now, I never played to a finish line. I always played today, to play the game and played as hard as I could and didn't worry about being injured and all that, and then got up the next day and did the same thing. But then all of a sudden during that time frame, there was a finish line of celebration that was being planned, and I didn't like that. I didn't want to think about that. I wanted to just stay in the mindset that we have a challenge today, we have a team challenge, and I'm going to try to meet that challenge of the day and be there for my teammates. That's the simple approach that I used. But there was pressure that started to develop, expectation to get to a finish line to break Lou Gehrig's record. And I tried to absorb that. There were some people that said, well, you should just play to the tying game and then take the next game off and then give tribute to Lou Gehrig. And I thought that would be the most alien thing to do, because I didn't do it because I tried to break Lou Gehrig's record. I play because I think that's the job. You should come to the ballpark ready to play. And I think that was an honorable position to have, that you're an everyday player and you're trying to help your team win. So the emotions started to build, and I didn't know how to deal with all these things except try to ignore it. So the game became official halfway through the game, which was alien to me because the game's not over. And so I'm thinking, okay, how can we stop the game? Because we're still playing. So when the game becomes official at the end of the fifth, if you're up, it's 4.5. If you're the home team, if you're up in the score, that becomes an official game. Or if you're losing, you got to go through 5 complete games. At that time, we were winning. So after 4.5, I come off the field. We're hitting in the bottom of the fifth, and the record is acknowledged. The banner on the warehouse goes down. Everybody claps and cheers. I recognize everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's the biggest curtain call you ever get. You might do something good and hit a home run and be called out of the dugout for the fans to cheer for you a second time. But I kept getting called out of the dugout, and the ovation stood for 22 minutes. And that's a long, long time to say thank you, thank you. And in my mind, I was thinking, thank you. Please, let's just let the game get back on, and then I'll celebrate as long as you want after the game's over. And that was sort of how I was viewing this. And everybody was kind of reacting to it. And it wasn't until Bobby Bowe and Rafael Palmeiro, they were talking about it. You need to take a lap around this field or we'll never get this game started. And I go, that's ridiculous. I'm not doing that. And then finally, Bobby Bowe, in his big old boisterous voice and his physicality, they decided to push me down the line to get me started. And then I did it as an obligation at first. I said, maybe they're right. And I started shaking hands. And then the magic really started to happen, because the celebration that happened in a big 50,000 feeling sort of sense, and you were down here, all of a sudden was more personal. And so I recognized people's faces, I recognized people's names as I went through. A lot of people had been there for years. I had been there for years. You realize there was all these signs. There was one in the right field fence where somebody tried to reach down from where they were and they fell over. And I thought they fell all the way to the bottom, which would have been a good 8 to 10 feet. And it just so happened that it wasn't. The ground behind the fence was much higher, so they popped back up again, scared me. And I started laughing, and we went around the ballpark. And then to have an opportunity to stop, embrace all the other team, every one of the California Angels, stood in line, and I talked to every one of them. Had a chance to celebrate with my little family. They were young. Ryan was a little over 2, and Rachel wasn't quite 6. And so they were taking it all in, and he had a chance to celebrate that. And then I thought one of the super special moments was my dad was up in the skybox. I had a skybox there, and we put him in the skybox. And I caught his eye, during this 22 minutes, and I was able to, and from an old school standpoint, my dad wasn't someone that said, "I love you," and all that kind of stuff. But you could see that he did, and his actions you could tell. But he wasn't that lovey-dovey sort of a dad, and that was sort of his time. But in that moment, looking back and forth, there was like 1,000 of those type words that were flying back and forth. And so that was a really special moment. It feels like it took about 10 minutes, but it probably was like 10 seconds. But that was a really cool moment. So there was tons of those moments. I always think when people talk about some of the great things that happened to you in your career on the field, what were the most meaningful ones? And the first and foremost was I caught the last out of the World Series as a 23-year-old guy. We won the World Series. It's part of your dream to be a big league player is to win the World Series, and we did. And so it was the greatest feeling of fulfillment, joy, that finality that you did it. And so that feeling is unparalleled. That stands all by itself. No one could have choreographed how that was going to play out. I thought the banner on the warehouse was ingenious. I thought about a week before or 2 weeks before when they started that ceremony of counting towards the goal or towards the record. So a 21-29, for example, a couple of games before, we were playing, in the fifth inning, it would come down to 21-29. Then the fifth inning of the next day, 21-30, and that was a tying game. And so it sort of educated the fans, and it created anticipation for that moment. Baseball, to me, you can be of any size and shape to play the game. It's really interesting. You look at the history of players. You have MVPs that, Altuve and Dustin Pedroia are small guys but swing a big bat, good high ball hitters. They can have a big influence on the team. Any size, any shape. Other sports, it's good to be tall if you're playing basketball. It's good to be super quick. In football, it's good to be big and strong, or the fastest person on the field. There are almost some physical aspects of those games in order to play at the highest level. With baseball, you can be any size, any shape, and you can give it a try. And there's an individual part of baseball that when you're at the plate, you're all by yourself. You're trying to do it in the field. The ground balls hit to you. No one else is helping you field that ground ball. But it's the way that you play together that you can blend that individual contribution to a team dynamic, which I think is the coolest part. So the nature of the game, it's not slow to me. It's a cerebral game. It's a lot of thinking that goes on, but you can take a lot of individual performance and blend them. They call it chemistry in baseball, that you're blending those talents, and personalities for a desired effect so you can win. And there's no better feeling than winning. I made my first trip onto the field. That's really weird when you look at my career. You would have never guessed this. My major league debut was as a pinch runner for Ken Singleton at second base, like in the 12th inning of a game. So Earl Weaver sent me out of the dugout and said, go run for Singleton. I was 20 years old, turning 21 later that month, but it was before my 21st birthday. And when you ran out in the field for the first time in a real game, like I had taken batting practice and tried to get used to the stadium. Now all of a sudden, people are in the stands, it's a real game, and the lights are on you. I went out looking around. I was in awe. I mean, I was thinking, God. And then I was so nervous. Don't mess up. Don't mess up. And that was in Baltimore. And Frank White, the second baseman for the Kansas City Royals, he put a pickoff play on the very first play that I was on second base, and I got back safely. And he tagged me, and he laughed. He goes, "Just checking, kid." You know, he was gauging whether I was too scared to do the right thing. So there was a base hit down the right field line. I scored the winning run in that game. No, the expectations and the pressures hadn't happened at that point. It was almost like you got your feet wet. And I felt like, I didn't really get to play. I got the pinch run, and then I just ran round third and touched home plate, and we won the game, so that was all cool. We were in a celebratory sense. But I wanted to contribute. I wanted to be in the game. I wanted to play. He got hurt in the minor leagues as a catcher, couldn't throw for 4 or 5 years. At a point when he was 24 or 25, they offered him a coaching position, a managing position in the minor leagues. He took it, so his dream was cut short, but he helped fulfill other people's dreams, getting them to the big leagues. Many times being a dad, many times being an instructor, many different things that would help a young man get to the big leagues. That was his role for the first 14 years of my life. I didn't think so. I mean, most people think of our situation. My dad was in professional baseball, but he was in the minor leagues, so he didn't have this big reputation of being, a star player. But we were looked at a little bit, my brother Billy and I, because we got to the big leagues. I think when you have an experience in Little League and the coach of a Little League team shows favoritism for his son who might not deserve to play, there's this sort of feeling that comes over them, and they associate that. So in a professional sense, there was a little bit of that, is that my dad must have pulled some strings to get you into professional ball. Even in the minor leagues, when I was leading the team in most offensive categories and I was considered a prospect, there were some players who were married. Some of their wives said, well, he's only here because his dad got him here. It was an added incentive to prove them wrong in many ways. So we all get motivated from different times, but my motivation was to prove those people wrong. And that wasn't my first priority. My first priority was to make my dad proud of me. And I think most sons want to make their dads proud of them. And in that sport, I had an opportunity, and I did. I'm very analytical, and I know my dad is very analytical, tries to figure out things and tries to understand many different things. And I think he helped me in examining different things in life by pointing them out. So I remember being in the car with my dad a number of times, and a piece of lumber would be hanging out someone's trunk, and they'd have a red flag on it. And he'd say, "Why do you think that red flag's on that back of that lumber?" And I'd look at it for a minute, and I wouldn't know. And I'd give him a couple possibilities. He said, "No, because it sticks out, and you want to give attention that it's sticking out of the back of your car, so it's a safety thing." And one time, the one that blew me away, I think I wrote about it in my book, was we were in a parking lot, and he looks over and sees two of the light standards are bent, and the other ones around are not bent. And it's in the middle of a parking lot. And he looks at it for a minute, and he goes, "Why do you think those two lights are bent?" And I go, "I don't know, somebody backed into them or something like that." He goes, "No." And he couldn't figure it out at first, but he sees someone that's painting the curb that maintains the parking lot and all that kind of stuff. So he walks over to him, and he says, "Those lights are bent," or something like that. And he saw the snowplow over there. It was in the wintertime, and he goes, "Where do you push your snow?" And the guy said, "I push the snow to the middle. We try to keep the outside, and you push them against those lights." And so then his answer came to him pretty quickly, is the snowplow pushes the things up, and the force of the snowplow bent the lights. And so he came back and he told me, but I was a kid. So by making his curiosity, his intellectual curiosity about how things work, why things were the same way, it was sort of a constant conversation. There are many great stories, and I wish I had one, that they deceive you a little bit and kind of think that you might be getting released, but then you're going to the big leagues. There's all kinds of games that a minor league manager sometimes plays in giving you the news. But in my particular case, the strike in 1981 had baseball stopped, and we were playing in the minor leagues. Then they agreed to terms and they came back. And so now the baseball was going to happen again. And I played a game in Syracuse, New York. I played for the Rochester Red Wings. We were on a road trip, but we drove back to Rochester that night. And I remember it was really late at night, 2:30, something like that in the morning. You're getting ready to go home from the ballpark where the bus came back. And the manager calls me into the office and says, congratulations, you're going to Baltimore tomorrow. Normally, that's you work at night, so you play a game at 7. Sometimes the game goes past 10 or 10:30. Sometimes you work out, your adrenaline's going, you eat afterwards, and then by the time you go to bed, it's 2:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. This particular time, we commuted to Syracuse, which then you had a bus trip in after the game to come back to your home ballpark, and then you get in your car and drive home. You've already eaten probably at a fast food place on the way back. No, I mean, my dad was very professional. Congratulations, well-deserved. Now it starts, something like that. So it was almost like I wanted my dad to jump up and down and, like my dad, but my dad was very professional, no favoritism whatsoever. You earn your way, very honorable. And so he didn't show that sort of fatherly emotion, on the field. But I will tell you, when I hit my first home run, and I'm running around the bases, and he's the third base coach, and I get to shake his hand, I could tell he was my dad. Wally Pitt was a power-hitting first baseman that supposedly took a day off and supposedly had a headache or something, took a day off, and then gave an opportunity to a guy named Lou Gehrig. And Lou Gehrig came in and never came out. So essentially, Wally Pitt lost his job because he took a day off. And my dad, through the minor leagues, would say, okay, look, if you want to take a day off and you think you're tired, and you sit down and the guy that replaces you gets 3 hits in the game that night, what do you think the manager is going to do tomorrow? He's going to want to play the guy that got 3 hits. Don't let that guy get 3 hits. It's almost a territorial view of your spot. You've earned your spot. You've got in there. Don't let anybody else take that away from you. So there is internal competitions that exist, not just playing against the other team, but the competitions of your own. There's people who want to take your job. And I will give you another example. I played shortstop, and Earl Weber moved me to shortstop. I think it was presented as a temporary move. I mean, I played shortstop at almost 6'5", 225 pounds, which no other person at that time of that size had success playing the position. They had nicknames, Pee-wee, Scooter, all those guys, or the Wizard. Ozzie Smith is probably the best that could play that position. Acrobatic, small, could move really well. All of a sudden, when I played that position, it was thought of that I was going to bolster the offense. I was an offensive player. I took great pride in my defense, and I did really, really well at defense. And my success at the position might have changed the mindset a little bit for other bigger guys to be considered at that position. But I will tell you, every year I went to spring training, there was always some whippersnapper shortstop that was coming in from a trade or coming in through the minor leagues that was going to take my job and move me back to third. So it was almost like you had to ward that off. You had to say, oh, I'm competing to stay at shortstop. And there were many, many different times where different managers came in, different people, and they had a different opinion whether I could play shortstop. Now, I played shortstop for 15 straight years, so that temporary move lasted quite a bit. But it wasn't without some sort of pushing off the competition to maintain that position. That's a process you learn as well. When you play every single day, you can prolong a slump by hanging your head and moping around, after having had a bad night, you struck out so much. My dad used to always say, tomorrow's a new day. And it's easier said than done, but you have to be able to clean the slate from the game before and then almost start anew, have a new point. It's valuable to learn from what happened from your mistakes so you don't make those kind of mistakes again. You can apply some of that learning. But once you start a new game, you can't carry that bad feeling from the game to the next game. You have to clean the slate sometimes. So many times if I was troubled, I'd be in the clubhouse a long time. I need to leave it at work. And if I'm troubled, I talk it out, I think about it, I go over all the different things. And sometimes I wouldn't come home, wouldn't leave the clubhouse. I didn't want to go home with that baggage. So I had to deal with it. However it made me feel. There were times, I will give you one story, which I was, and sometimes you'd work out extra hard. You would not punish yourself or something in the weight room for having not done something on the field. One such day, I was struggling so bad. I had a game-winning opportunity to drive somebody in, struck out in a key situation of the game. Felt like the whole outcome of the game was on my shoulders. And so I was so frustrated. I had my baseball uniform on. I went in, and I ran on the treadmill for like an hour and a half in my uniform. And it was almost like I had this physical need to get this out, and I was like I was punishing myself for not coming through in the clutch. And people kept coming in and out and looking at me on the I don't know what they were thinking about me doing that, but that was my way of physically dealing with that. Like if you're hitting really well, you can face the best pitchers in the league and you feel pretty good. You feel you got a chance. If you're not hitting really well, other pitchers that you normally hit, you can't hit either. You can't hit anybody. So it really starts from within yourself. Of course, I just told you I was very analytical, so I would consider all things and analyze all things, but I kept coming back to the same approach, is that I think that everybody should come to the ballpark. I didn't make the lineup out. It's the manager's job. And the streak wasn't created by me saying, you manager, you Earl Weaver, you put me in the lineup every day. The job of a player, in my opinion, is to come to the ballpark because you're part of a team. And then the manager chooses who you play. So by the manager's choices, and there was several different managers, their choices put me in the lineup and I performed. And so then you earn your right to deserve your chance to play. And then there's a reason why the manager's writing in the lineup. So the streak was created by these decisions, daily decisions by managers. Now, at some point, some managers say, well, the streak's too big and I just had to keep writing his name in the lineup. I would think that that is sort of shirking your responsibilities as a manager. You have a job to do, I have a job to do. All I did was come to the ballpark all the time. But in moments of slump, and the game is a series of slumps. I mean, I had plenty of slumps. You have to, do you believe that you can find the answers by sitting on the bench and then maybe practicing, or you need a mental break and all that? There's all kinds of players. I never thought the answers were in the batting cage or on the bench watching somebody else play. And the manager would put me in the lineup for a lot of reasons. So you mentioned Frank Robinson a minute ago. Frank Robinson probably paid me the biggest compliment, and I didn't know this until after the fact. He said there was plenty of times when I was a manager where I thought I needed to give you a day off. I needed to take you out of the lineup. You were struggling as a hitter. You were agonizing over that. And I thought it would be good for you individually if I took you out and then let you regroup, and maybe you'll come back and hit better. He said, but selfishly, I sat down and I thought about all the other things you did in the course of a game. All the other values that you bring to the table each and every day, is that I didn't want to take you out. So I put you, one of the easiest jobs of my job as a manager was I had to wait for someone to come to the ballpark to see if they could play. And I had to check with them to see if they could play. He said, with you, I knew you could play, and I just put you in the lineup. So I think, there was these intangible values that nowadays you're analyzing everything so statistically oriented. And I'm a stat guy, I'm a data guy. I love that, and I love using that to your advantage. But there are intangible values. I mentioned earlier, Eddie Murray's presence hitting number 4 in the lineup. He could be 0 for 75, which I don't think he ever was. But even if he was 0 for 75, he allowed me to stay in my slot. He allowed everybody else to stay in their slot. And I tell you what, when the manager looked at the 6th inning of the ball game and you looked at, do I change my pitcher or not, and we got Eddie Murray coming up, he affected the manager's decision just by his presence. I think things shift and evolve, and sometimes the balance of things gets out of whack. I think there's good baseball understanding. The thing about all the numbers and the stats and all that kind of stuff is you got to figure out, how do they help me be a better baseball player? What do I apply? How do we become a better team? And sometimes there might be too much emphasis on the stats and the baseball stats, and maybe some of the analysis is not really good. But then it's also, sometimes you rely too much on the subjective, and your feeling of what happens, whether I should pinch hit this guy or not, and you might go the other way. So my dad used to say, in baseball, every 10 years or so, there's sort of a cycle that somebody will think that this hasn't been tried before, and they try something in the game only to find out that the game's been going on a long time and this has been tried. So I don't look at it as all or nothing. There is sort of a change right now where the numbers guys are looking at how to teach to the numbers and how to do all that kind of stuff. And the baseball piece will start to come back, and it'll all merge in a way that everybody's happy with. I think the beauty of being able to compare statistics over time, baseball has been ahead of other sports like the home run records and stuff like that. Now, steroids probably have changed, people's view of some of these records. It used to be 30 home runs was a big home run year, and then all of a sudden the number went up. 500 home runs was almost, there's only a few people in the history of baseball that did that. And I think for those that really looked at comparing great players from era to other eras, I think it took the air out of them, in a lot of ways. And in some ways, the athlete is bigger, stronger, faster anyway, and the game evolves. And I'm probably most proud of that I was able to put a little bit of mark on the game and hopefully make the game better for the next people that play the game. Whether it's a streak or whether it's my success as a shortstop, whether it's I got 3,000 hits, whatever I was able to do that might better the game or leave a positive mark on it. I personally think the game should get better and better over time. As the athletes understand the game, conditioning is better. Steroids kind of put a blurb in there, and I don't know to what extent it still is in the game or not. That's kind of a funny story. Is some people just stand there and get hit. Some people, think it's a manly sort of thing, is saying, okay, it's not going to hurt me. I'll take the hit by pitch and go to first base. I was never of that opinion. I would rather get out of the way of the ball, and I was pretty good at getting out of the way. I stood off the plate a little bit. It's kind of funny. My son, when he first started playing baseball as a 8-year-old, there was a period he got hit and he was kind of scared of the ball. And I was trying to say, it's part of the game. You can't hit by being scared or thinking you're going to get hit. You have to have the confidence that you can get out of the way. And so I took a tennis ball or a squishy ball in there, and I gave him some techniques, and I started to throw the ball inside. And then I said, look, I'm going to try to hit you with this softball now, see if I can. And so we invented a game called sort of dodgeball a little bit, and he became pretty good at getting out of the way. And I said, is there anybody on your team that gets hit all the time? And I said, he goes, yeah, this catcher gets hit all the time. And I go, why do you think it is? He says, because he just stands there. He doesn't get out of the way. I said, right. You don't have to worry about it because you can get out of the way of the ball. And so that's how I thought. So I got hit enough times. I got hit in the head, I think 7 times. I counted it up one time. And every single time I got hit in the head, I was looking for a breaking ball, which you have to wait and convince yourself that it's going to break. Sometimes it starts right here. And if you're waiting longer to make sure it breaks and all of a sudden it's not the pitch you're looking for, then it's a fastball and you put yourself in danger. And so each time that happened, it doesn't feel good. And when it hits you in the helmet, you're thankful that you have a helmet on. Well, it has to be able to help you because you have to identify the ball and sometimes the spin of the ball. You have to see it. I will tell you, I was happiest when we went to spring training. Sometimes you get poked and prodded from the medical staff and all that kind of stuff as part of your spring training. And they're doing all kinds of tests on you and all that kind of stuff, which is good. And one of the tests is your eye test. And I remember after you get your eye tested for the first couple times, and the same people do the eye test, they start bragging on you that you can see this line, or your eyes are really that good. And it always made me feel good. They always built me up. So then when I took the eye test and performed really well and read the bottom line or something on it, they would stick their chest out and be proud of me. And I always thought that day games were difficult for me because the glare, whether it's bouncing off your cheeks or, I've always felt like I had to squint. So I always tried to put eye black under my eyes. And even I tried to wear some glasses, but it was difficult to play in the daytime sometimes for me because it felt like you would wear your eyes out by squinting. You would wear the muscles out. And sometimes early on in my baseball career, since there's a lot of downtime on traveling and you're in the road and you're on a plane and all that kind of stuff, I got drafted straight out of high school. I was a good student in high school, but I didn't get a chance to go to college. And so I thought that I would use my opportunities of downtime to educate myself, to read on subjects about history or things that you wanted to read about. And I found myself reading a lot and feeling good that I was educating myself, but I was wearing my eyes out. And so you get to home plate at 7 o'clock at night after you've read, in your hotel room, and all of a sudden you're not as alert, and you're not crisp. It's not clear. It feels like things are blurry. And I kept thinking, okay, I got to stop this reading, And then when I stopped doing that, and then you would stay in a dark room, similar to Hank, you had to understand, and this is part about learning about yourself, is you have to understand the most important time for my eyes to be really alive is when I'm at home plate. And so you geared your behaviors during the course of the day or that to so that you can have the best chance to see. I found out that a quiet room, dark shades in a room, and even watching a movie didn't tire my eyes out as nearly as much as doing some of the other stuff that required you to be in front of a computer. But audiobooks is one of the ways that I did it. In those days, they were all cassettes, or you have all these different. Nowadays, you can just do it digitally. And it's a whole lot better. Have someone read to you and just close your eyes. So that was the way that I got around it. The mound is always 60 feet 6 inches. It's supposed to be 12 inches tall, but many stadiums push it up a little higher. It's interesting. I thought Seattle looked like their mound was like 20 inches tall, and you had Randy Johnson standing on top of that, and it seemed like he was throwing at a different angle. But the bases are always the same, and the mound's the same. So you have those references that you can play, especially as an infielder. That's important to kind of understand where you play as it relates to those constant references. But the fences were different. Playing in Fenway Park was really cool. It was a museum type experience because the big green monster, it was so close. It changed the way you played a little bit. It changed some of the responsibilities. Like as a shortstop, fly ball to left field, and the left fielder goes back against the wall, and it hits off the wall and he doesn't quite catch it. The closest person to that ball is me as a shortstop. And normally in any other ballpark, that's not the case. The center fielder is coming over. I have a responsibility to be someplace else. So I loved the understanding that you had to look at the ballpark and you had to change your game a little bit and some of your responsibilities. We talk about awareness. You had to be aware of these things so you could react to them properly. It used to be you went into Fenway, they hit a ball off the wall. It was a double because our left fielder didn't know how to play the ball off the wall. We hit a bullet off the wall. It's a single. It was a little thing. You go to the Metrodome in Minnesota. The ball could be lost in the lights and the ceiling mostly, because it has a big old ceiling, and the ceiling color is the same as the ball. So if the high fly ball went up and you took your eye off it and tried to pick it back up again, you couldn't. So you had to remind yourself of those things. The Minnesota Twins, I'd watch them, and they all would get together in a cluster. Like say the ball was up, and it was in the middle of the diamond. You got the second baseman, you got the first baseman, the shortstop kind of converging, and they're looking, do you see it? No, I don't see it. Do you see it? Yeah, I see it. Okay, I'll take it. So there was this extra conversation that took place where they grouped it because they understood what happened. And if the ball hit the turf, it bounced really high. So if you knew of all those things, you could take advantage of those. And Minnesota had a home field advantage. They had a blooper to right center field. They weren't thinking just a single, that the guy was going to come in. They were thinking it was going to hit and hang in the air, and we'll take that extra base. I don't know if I had a least favorite. Fenway was interesting and it was a cool place, but I mean, you banged your head on the dugout, every inning because it was older and it was built for the player that was smaller at that time. So I was 6'4", so I left there with a bunch of bruises on my head. Old Tiger Stadium was similar. The dugouts were really small and it was hard to see the whole game, but it was really a cool space in which to play. I will tell you, Yankee Stadium, you had your ups and downs in, because I've been in that ballpark when we were really good and they were not, and so there wasn't a whole lot of action going on. There wasn't a whole lot of interest going on, and so it wasn't that great. I've been in that ballpark when we were really bad and the Yankees were really good, and then they all yell at you and they beat up on you, and that's not fun. But when you're good and they're good at the same year, same time, and you go into a September series, basically with the American League East title on the line, that happened a few times in my career where this 4-game series could change the way that the whole season happens. The fans in New York were so reactive. They didn't need anybody, any scoreboard to prompt them to cheer. And they knew when a big pitch was happening in a 1-1 pitch in the first inning in a key situation. And that place would be rocking. And so there were times when you in order to play, you have to zone all that out. And so you're hitting and you're fielding and all that kind of stuff. You can't be worrying about all that. There were times in Yankee Stadium when I was walking to the mound, pitching coach was coming out to kind of talk to the pitcher for a second, kind of calm him down to buy a little time. We might have a lead in the game by 1 run. They just have their leadoff hitter on base, and all of a sudden they can anticipate. Derek Jeter was coming to the plate or something. They're anticipating that something good's going to happen, and this place is rocking. You could take yourself out of the baseball mode, and it felt like it was the loudest place, outdoor place that you're in. And it felt like the stands were kind of bouncing a little bit, and you would think to yourself, man, this is cool. And then you walk back to the position of shortstop and try to zone it all out again. I homered in 21-29, 21-30, and 21-31. So I hit the homer in 3 straight games. And it was really important to perform, but I mean, my adrenaline was pumping pretty hard, and you had to try to calm that feeling down, that emotional feeling of expectation that was happening. My last All-Star game, you would think after all these years, 21 years, I'm in my last All-Star game in Seattle. I come to the plate, and they give me a standing ovation. And then I have to step out of the batter's box and acknowledge it's my last year. I said I was retiring. It was part a send off, and it was part just a great cheer. And I remember stepping back, and I got a little emotional because you're starting in your last year when you announce that you're retiring. Every time you do something, it's the last time you're doing it. In some ways, it's last time I'm going to Chicago, last time I'm going to Toronto, last time I'm going here. And you've had all this time, it's my last All-Star game. And so when I was up there, I could feel the emotions kind of filling up inside of me. And then pulling back, it was a cool and special moment, but then you had to hit. So then you had to get back in there and hit. So you have to talk about how quickly you change. You have to take all this great stuff that's going on and go boom and get back in there. And lucky enough, on the first pitch, I hit a home run, and I run around the bases. And sometimes it's one of those things. How did I do that? I wish I could tell you exactly how I do it because I would have done it every pitch. But what I'm saying is when you get comfortable in your environment and you get comfortable playing and you can relax to a point where your concentration goes to that level, then you've achieved, the ultimate. And so the idea is, to what degree can I keep myself in that moment? And I found myself over the years, you say, how did I hit in pressure? I mean, I don't think I was much greater than anybody else in pressure. I came through with some clutch hits, and I rose to the occasion on a number of times, and people thought that was amazing. But I remember getting the opportunity to play in all-star games, from a very early time. But in the early days, I was scared to death because you make the all-star team. There's one game being played that day. All the other games, people are off for the all-star break, and you have the best of the American League playing the best of the National League in the all-star game. And so all your players are watching. Everybody around the world is watching. And I kept thinking, don't embarrass yourself. So I was very cautious, saying, okay, don't take chances, don't embarrass yourself, don't be over-aggressive at home plate. But then I found out by doing that, you couldn't succeed. You have to take some chances. And so I learned how to control some of my emotions, and I learned that if I stayed within myself and I breathed a little bit and say, okay, don't try too hard, but you would calm yourself down just by having that little conversation, reminding yourself of things. Okay, you're in the moment. If I put a good swing on the ball, good things happen. You don't have to try to hit a home run, just hit the ball hard. I will say the guys that are in the Hall of Fame now, they end up seeing every induction year when you go up, they're generally all the number ones. If there is truth, a number one starter on the team, and if you're lucky, you might have two number one starters on your team. The number ones on your team are at a different level. And then everybody else is, although they're good and they have great stuff, they're not the same challenge. They're the Randy Johnsons and Nolan Ryans or, the Roger Clemens, all those guys that were very difficult to hit. The challenge is going to be at the highest level. Pedro Martinez probably had the best year and had the best stuff of anybody I've ever seen. He had the best fastball that year in the league, he had the best curveball, and he had the best changeup. And even if you guessed right, it was very difficult to square the ball up and have success off of him. And he was on such a big roll. God, that's such a sometimes a touchy issue, is that there should be some honor in the game, that when you're playing and you're competing against somebody in the other way, that there's certain things that you wouldn't do. But I'm not going to say the catcher never tried to get inside your head or you didn't try to get inside his head a little bit. But for the most part, there was a respect that they didn't rag on you while you're trying to hit and all that kind of stuff. I guess there were times when I remember my dad's story in the times when he played, and he was a catcher. He would do that, or if somebody tried to do that to him, he would step out of the batter's box and said, "Look, if you keep talking, I'm going to hit you right in the mask with this bat." and then it would stop all the chatter and then go back in. But I can tell you, you can use any sort of getting inside your head to your advantage by proving somebody wrong. And many times, because you do it so often, you're playing the game so often that if you're struggling, there was an old saying that is, you should let them struggle. Don't wake them up. And you can wake somebody else up by doing those things that you're talking about, or provoking them, or sometimes throwing at you. You might wake the hitter up to a point of concentration. So managers had different techniques, but I never had a problem. I learned myself. I think the most important thing about playing in a high pressure situation or playing at the highest level is to understand yourself and understand yourself in all situations. And if you don't try to be to be like Eddie Murray or someone else. Use some of the advice that they might give you, but learn yourself. I have a different opinion of that. There is a standard of how you play the game. And if you've read I think there was even a chapter in the book that was playing fair, is that I don't believe when you're playing against the pitcher, and I'm the hitter against the pitcher, I don't believe the challenge is between me, the pitcher, and the guy on second base. So if the guy on second base has decoded the signals from the catcher, should he be allowed to relay the signs to me and to let me know what's coming? I thought that's not in the spirit of competition, but I could be in the minority. Most baseball players saying, well, you earn my right to get to second base, and if you don't put down a sequence of signs that stops me from doing that, then it's your fault. I don't like the cameras. I don't like if you stand on the on-deck circle and you see the catcher move inside, and then you verbally tell the hitter in some coded way that the catcher's sitting inside, I don't think that's in the spirit of the competition. So I never gave a sign from second base, and I never received one. If with your own eyes, if you see things that's going on, say I'm on second base, and then I can decode because I'm a middle infielder and I've seen a lot of different situations. There could be first sign indicator. There could be a sign after 2. There could be the third sign. It could be first sign after 1. You could change this usually as a fastball. 2 is a curveball, 3 is a slider, and wiggle's a changeup. You could change the meaning of those. 1 could be a curveball. There could be all kinds of creative ways. I think the hardest one I've ever seen, and I'll share this with you, it was called ABE, A-B-E. So what A stands for is ahead, B stands for behind, and then E stands for even. So it was all about the count. So if the count starts 0-0, what's that tell you? It's an even count, so it's the third sign. If the count goes 1-0, then you're behind in the count. Then it's head behind. That's a second sign. And if the count goes 0-1, so it's always about the count. So you always have to be in tune with what the count is all the time. You always have to be in tune with the count to understand which pitch is going on. Now, that could be confusing because you want to get into a rhythm. And the catcher's going, okay, what's the count? He should know the count and all that. But infielders are trying to figure out. Pitchers sometimes are throwing the wrong pitch, and then you get out of your rhythm. So you can be too complicated. You can mess yourself up by the complexity of your signals. But if you make them too simple, somebody on second base can see. So if I'm a base stealer, which I wasn't, but I would think it's okay if I'm on second base and I'm on second base for a couple pitches and I see the signals going down. I see, okay, he's going to throw a curveball on this pitch, which is a slower pitch. Chances it's going to be in the dirt. This might be a good pitch to run on. I would think that it's totally all right that I've used that for my own advantage to play. That's in the spirit of the competition. But I don't agree with me figuring out the signs then transferring them to somebody else or getting them through a center field camera or getting them through watching it feed and then banging the trash can in the bottom. I don't think that's the right spirit of how you play. I tell you what, in the electronic age, if you, I don't know whether buzzers or anything else are true, but if you have an electronic indicator, on you, and then somebody's telling you what's coming by buzzing you, whatever else, that makes hitting way easier. And it's not right. The challenge is to try to figure out the pitcher. The pitcher's trying to figure out you. The cheating has been around. I mean, for years, there was a guy sitting in the scoreboard in Chicago, supposedly, and he was turning a light bulb on and off with binoculars so you could see the catcher's signs. Those stories have been around for baseball for a long, long time. And there's some feeling that within the story, within there, that some stealing of signs, like I gave you the example in second base, should be okay. Or if a catcher puts his fingers down too low, and you're on first base and you can see the signals. Or a pitcher tipping his pitches. If a pitcher tips his pitches in a way that gives you an indication, like sometimes the pitcher will grip the ball right in front of you. So if he holds it to your side and he holds it this way, it's a fastball. If he holds it this way, it's a curveball. So that's giving you an indication. If I look at the pitcher, which I'm staring at the pitcher, it's my competition, and I look down at his hand and he's holding the ball this way, and every time he does that, he throws a curveball, then I'm going, okay, I can use that. It's not that somebody else is stealing that and telling me. It's I can use that to my advantage in the spirit of the competition. No. No, it's my brother Billy and I joke all the time. We try to figure out when you get to the playoffs, it used to be the 162 challenges you, your whole team, your depth challenges every single day to who is the best team in the league that particular year. And it used to be American League. Whoever won the American League in 162 on a balanced schedule would go right to the World Series, and the National League, whoever won that, would go to the World Series. So the two best teams, proven by the 162, by the depth of your team and about getting to the finish line, you're the best team in the league that year. One of the two best teams in the league is going to be the world champion. Now, once you expand the playoffs and you have different divisions, it's who is the hot team that ends up kind of winning. If you're a wild card team and you develop some momentum and you're one out from going home and you get past that, then all of a sudden it seems like you're playing with house cards, you relax, things go your way, and any team can beat any other team. But the depth of your team with off days and all that kind of stuff isn't always challenged. So sometimes you can have one pitcher that pitches game 1, 4, and 7 in a 7-game series and impact the World Series in a bigger way. So Billy and I kind of joke, and maybe you find this out, in a situation like this year. You figure out it would be cool if you put both teams, the World Series, the guys who go in the World Series, in one city, and you play 7 straight games. And so the depth of your team matters. Your decisions you make in game 1 and 2 and 3 affect as you go along. And then find out who wins in a 7-game series with no off days. You play in the same place. Now, there's a lot of hurdles to get past during that. Is that the teams that are waiting to get to the World Series wants to celebrate that World Series in their hometown, and I can't blame them. But from a baseball perspective, it would be interesting. So I don't know what the plans are for baseball now. Are you going to play in a bubble? Like the NBA and the NHL has figured out how to, play and try to control the environment. Are the playoffs then going to be controlled that way for baseball? I'm not up to speed on that, but it might be a good opportunity to try something, like this crazy idea that Billy and I had, that 7 straight games really proves your baseball mettle. I played in a minor league game, which we played 32 innings in one night. So we played the longest game in the history of professional baseball. It was 33-inning games, and it played till 4:07 in the morning. The whole concept of the game being boring, it's a mental game in many ways. It's a cerebral game. There's a lot of situations that change. There's things that happen all the way through, and I think the more you know about the game, the more you can be into what are happening all the time. It feels like it's slow. It feels like, and there are probably some ways that you can increase the way the game is played, and that might start in the minor leagues where you encourage them, not to walk around the mound, not so many meetings, because there's a lot of stalling that happens. I'm an optimistic person, so. In some ways, instead of feeling sorry for yourself and saying, okay, we only get to play 60 games and it's not without fans, let's make the best of it. Let's figure out, maybe there's something we learn from this experience that can make the game better going forward. Don't know what that is yet, but I will tell you the baseball game is magical when there are people in the stands. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we really try hard, especially on the road when it's not hostile per se, but you're not home, is that you try to perform, but there is an energy and there's a life that happens when you have people around. It's just when you go to a restaurant, a lot of times, and you want to be in a restaurant, it is about the quality of the food, but it's also about the action and the people are alive. We all are social, and we all feed off each other. And to have that energy in the ballpark, I will tell you, a pressure situation is 100 times more pressure situation when you got people who care in that ballpark rooting one way or the other. It's the best thing in the world. It's the best feeling in the world that if you're able to come through in a moment like that and send the crowd into a tizzy, one way or the other, it makes you feel like you've accomplished something. It's a challenge that, and that's the magic. That's the magic of it all. Baseball's a great game, and these professionals are going to compete really hard, and they're trying to hit that 95-mile-an-hour fastball. It's going to be important, and to whatever level they'll figure that out, and the quality of the competition will be good, but the magic of having the people in the stands, you can't replace that. He's plugging along. He's 27 years old, so this particular cancellation of the season, hurts him a little bit. It's a year of development that he's missing, but he's trying to find his way. He had a difficult start to his pro career where he was injured. Lost sort of a position in the organization, but then found it again with the Orioles. And last year he had a great year, and he was looking forward to continuing to develop as a player. It's horrible in some ways. His last name, the expectations, from when he was really small, people were looking for him to do great things all the time. I was able to develop and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes without those expectations. But his expectations, at 11 years old, all these teams would come over and go, okay, which one is he? They go, oh, he's that. And if he made an out or struck out or did something, they would look to each other and go, he's not that good. And then, so my son felt that and felt like there was some sort of expectation. So it couldn't have been fun, for him. But I give him a lot of credit is he pushed through. He was a heck of a basketball player and played basketball in high school, good athlete, and has got some super talent in baseball. I will tell you, I was very sensitive about it. And my mom might have been a little mad at me that I didn't name my son after me. I was named after my dad. And it was almost like my mom thought it would be cool to give my name to my son, Cal Ripken III. I had my daughter first. Rachel was born first, and if Rachel would have been a boy, I might have done that. But then after I had a chance to live life a little longer, and I started to think of the ramifications, and then hear stories from Brooks Robinson or even read about Mickey Mantle, about naming their sons after them, it seemed to be an added burden that you placed on your son. And I wanted my son to have his own identity. I mean, the last name, being a little bit different than the last name, sometimes didn't allow him to take the journey where he can find out fully about himself. But I want him to be him. Whatever that is, whatever his passion is, wherever his talent carries him, whatever he wants to do in life, no pressure from me, no expectations from me. He should do it. And I thought I kept picturing roll call in school, where you call out the name, to take the roll, and having my name repeated, out loud, like Cal Ripken, and then everybody would turn around and kind of look. Ryan Ripken. I try to keep things in perspective, which is probably one of the greatest things my parents gave me. Just because you can hit and throw or doesn't mean that you're different. You should keep that in perspective. Everybody has their own talents, and everybody should earn their way and that sort of thing. So I always try to keep things in perspective. And perspective on fame, I wasn't someone that wanted to pound my chest and say, look at me, but because I was good in baseball and because I got attention and because people did name their dogs after me and they knew my name, that was an issue, and how was I supposed to deal with that? How was I going to deal with that with my own son or my own kids? And sometimes I think it was a great burden to have the last name and have the expectations created, and they had to deal with that in their own way. I couldn't protect them from it. I could try to explain it to them, but I think one of the good things I did was not give my son, he's named Ryan Calvin, so he has my first name, and I'm proud of that. But I tried to alleviate some of the burden, and I try to explain to them in real simple terms that they should maintain perspective. So I think one of the great things about baseball, when you look at the makeup of your team, many times you find yourself in the back of a bus, you find yourself in the back of the plane, and you look around and there's people from all cultures. And now it's become a much more worldly game. So you can sit in the back of the bus and have somebody from Japan, from different parts of the world. The thing that we all have in common is that we can catch and throw and hit, and there's a certain togetherness that happens, from that. So I think that's the coolest part. And even from different backgrounds, you got people that live in the country, people that live in the city, people that had a good background where they were kind of rich. You had people that were kind of poor. And but it doesn't matter when you're on the plane or you're on the back of the bus or when you're playing out in the field. None of that stuff matters, which is the coolest thing in the world. And so sport, I'm an envoy to the State Department to spread goodwill through sport. And I think when you go to I've been to China, I've been to Nicaragua, I've been to the Czech Republic, I've been to Japan, and you're going to spread goodwill. And it's the language of sport, and in particular for me, it's the language of baseball that you socially accept, which I think is a one thing. There's a trust that occurs that you're sharing those sorts. So whether I don't get into political goodwill, I guess, when you're doing it for the State Department, but you are making friends through sport, and the trust is already there when you can relate in the course of baseball. I know the challenge is now is that everybody is asked to specialize in a sport really early. Instead of giving them an opportunity, giving all people an opportunity to play and get an opportunity. And so I think Major League Baseball is trying to expose baseball to areas and give other people the opportunity. I know we have a foundation that I started after my dad, and we essentially use baseball or sport as an icebreaker to make friends, and you start to match them with good mentors and give them a different direction and a positive outlet sometimes where you have some negative influences that are pulling on them. So we've had really great success going into places, but we've built these youth development parks that essentially, to me, are safe outdoor classrooms. And we feel really good. And it's really interesting. Even I went into a club in D.C. one time. And sometimes you're introducing baseball to a group of kids that hadn't played baseball before. But they're super athletic. And my favorite stories is there was this big guy that was kind of controlling the club, from a leadership standpoint. There was a bunch of kids, but there was this one guy that pushed his way to the front of the line, and I'm throwing the ball to him, and he takes this big mighty swing, and he can't hit it. And then there's this small little meek kid that comes in behind him that's very shy. I flip the ball up to him, and he has the hand-eye coordination to swing the bat, and the ball jumps off his bat. And to see the dynamic change, whereas the big kid is demanding, I'm the leader, I get to tell you what to do kind of thing in this environment. And then all the other kids want to go to the little kid and say, how did you do that? And then and the big kid kind of gets mad at the little kid, for doing that. So I just think that baseball is pretty magical in that way. And I know Major League Baseball is trying to expose, baseball in all areas to give kids a chance to play. Sometimes I change gloves because there was one time Kirby Puckett hit me a ball in the Metrodome, and I went to catch it and had so much topspin on it that it hit the palm of my glove and spun out, and I had an error in that play. And I kept thinking, okay, I got to change this glove out because the spin off the turf, I got to have a glove that catches the ball as opposed to trapping the ball. Like sometimes on double plays, you end up not closing the glove around the ball. You just catch it and throw. But so I took a different glove, which ironically, when I changed my glove that time, whereas you catch the ball first, stop the spin, then catch it and throw the ball to first base. That glove that I switched to was my practice glove, and I really didn't like it a whole lot, but I kept using it, and that was the glove that I only made 3 errors in the whole season in 1 year. And I can't tell you why. That glove lasted me almost 3 years that I used the game glove. Now, when you have a game glove, the way you wear your glove out is in practice. You're taking hundreds of ground balls with another glove. And so you're wearing more practice gloves out than you wear out your game glove. So I always left my game glove for the game. One of my gloves that's my prized possession, and I've been looking for it. I think I put it in a special place and now forgot where it is, but I'm sure I have it, is that Ronald Reagan threw out the first pitch in 1984. 1983, we won the World Series. So opening day comes the next year. We're playing the Chicago White Sox. He comes out to throw the first pitch out. The Secret Service comes to me and says, do you have a glove for the president to throw out the first pitch? So I said, great. So I gave him my backup gamer, and I gave it to the Secret Service, and he threw out the first pitch. There's a couple cool pictures that has the glove showing when he threw out the first pitch. So he stayed in the dugout for the first inning of the game. I hit in the first inning of the game, hit a homer in the first inning of the game. He was like the honorary manager. And he made some sort of comment to me like, you're making me look good as the manager. And he gave me the glove back after the home run. And I said, Mr. President, I would love it if you keep the glove. And he said, no, I can't do that. And I said, well, if you give it back to me, you have to sign it. I just said that. I don't know where I got the courage that way. He took out a pen, and he signed Ronald Reagan on the glove and gave it to me. So I have that glove in my possession. So that's a little bit more meaningful. That was a backup gamer glove, but it's still the glove that the President of the United States threw out the first pitch, and he signed it. So that's a. I guess if I'm a collector, I'm a collector of that. But most of the other stuff is game stuff, bats. If I break a bat, I gave a lot of bats out to kids. One of the fun part about when you break a bat sometimes, you're coming out after a game, there's a crowd of people there. You find the smallest kid that's sitting there that is trying to get his way in, and you single him out and you give him your bat. My wife's a judge, and she gets a call from the Chief Justice's office in her chambers, and to call him back. And she was thinking, God, wonder what they want. And there's this special in-house musical celebration that they do for themselves. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been in charge of it for 15 years or so. And it's sort of an internal celebration, and Chief Justice Roberts always has a themed remarks, for that. And so in this particular theme, they were thinking about substitutions, because they had to cancel, one group canceled on them at one point, and then somebody else filled in for them. And Chief Justice Roberts is a pretty good sports fan, and he was thinking about the most famous substitution in the history of sports or baseball would be Wally Pipp being substituted by Lou Gehrig, and Wally Pipp losing his job. So they started to research that a little bit, and then they said, well, we have someone close by that actually broke that record, Cal Ripken, and he's married to a judge. We probably could get him to come. And so that was the answer and the request. Of course, my wife it was a great moment. I mean, he's a fantastic speaker, and the theme of the speech, I was sitting there in awe just listening to him. But basically, he made the comparison that Cal was there. There's 8 other people on Cal's team, and he was there for each one of the 8 each and every day, making it easier for them. And he's the Iron Man of baseball, but we have the Iron Woman of the Supreme Court who makes us other 8 that much better each and every day. So it was a wonderful tribute. And I remember I had to stay back, and it was a surprise. And then he made those remarks, and he says, and we have Cal Ripken here. So I stood up, and I think it's only appropriate that the Iron Man of baseball meet the Iron Woman of the Supreme Court. I don't sit in judgment. First you have to feel, and you can never say that question if somebody's injured or not, because if they're injured, or they say their muscles are tighter and they can't play for that, or they need a physical break, you have to assume that that's true. But I will tell you, I am proud of my influence as an everyday player. There's been some players that come to be teammates of mine that go on and push themselves to play 162, and maybe it's just for 1 year. But there were 2 guys, Brady Anderson and B.J. Surhoff, that pushed themselves to play the 162 and had the best years of their career. And I've heard other players say, they feel like they can't take a day off, or they can't ask for a day off in my presence. And in some ways, I think that's a positive influence. But I don't sit in judgment of anyone. And I think in this day and age, they're looking at, let me get the best 145 games out of my player as opposed to the 162. And maybe you're not looking at it from the intangible values of playing every day and the challenges, because the playoffs can be determined even more so by 1 game. 1 game can determine whether you make the playoffs or not out of 162. And so you don't know which game that is. I played in my rookie year, 1982. I ended up playing 160 games. I think I missed 1 game because I got hit in the coconut, and I think I missed 1 because I had a temperature of 104 or something in Chicago. But that was early in the season. But as the season went on, we came into game number 162 tied evenly with the Milwaukee Brewers. So the playoffs was determined. The winner was determined on the last day of the season. We ended up losing to the Milwaukee Brewers. They went on to play in the World Series in that particular year. And we all sat down through the course of the wintertime and tried to remember a game we should have won, or where could we have made that 1 game up. And that's the idea of playing every day too, is you don't know how the end of the season is going to end up, and you don't want to put yourself in a position to go back and say, I wish I would have played this game, or I wish I had played that game, I wish I didn't take that off. Maybe I could have helped us win in that way. So I don't sit in judgment, but I do like people to understand the importance and the significance of each and every game. It's a principle and it is a value, and it's something that people really care about. And I can tell you that because we're going to celebrate. September 6th will be the 25th anniversary of that night. That happened September 6, 1995, and it's already been 25 years. One of the greatest things that I was able to experience during that celebration was the lead up is that everybody else shared their streak with me. You know, I haven't missed a day of work in 31 years. From the first day of school to the end, I had perfect attendance. There's a value that everybody understands in their own life, the importance of showing up and committing to something. And I thought particularly it was good. Ernie Tyler had worked at the stadium. He was, at the time, he was an umpire attendant, took care of the umpires, did the balls behind home plate. He hadn't missed a home game in 31 years, you know, and he voluntarily ended his streak by coming to my Hall of Fame ceremony, which was a really good tribute and a good honor. But it's amazing is that it's important to people to show up. It's important to people to commit to that. And so the joy was to hear all the different stories and what was important to them and how they haven't missed a day. You find out a lot of times when the going gets tough, sometimes people disappear, you know, whether it's in business, whether it's on the team. When you really need to have them show up, they're not there. And so I think people take great pride, no matter what happens, good or bad, rain or shine, I'm going to be there. And I think that most people think that is a good trait.